There now follows a party political broadcast by the Conservative Party.
Morning everyone, it's that Monday morning feeling again with Mr McGregor's Monday Morning Mining Memoirs. Something to brighten your day up, and I know it will. This is my first presentation, so I'll give you an introduction to my mining memoirs. Each week I'll give you, the uneducated, the fountain of my knowledge by means of a soliloquy. Look it up in a dictionary, for God's sake. I will tell you the story of those two tribes that went to war, the National Union of Mineworkers and Arthur Scargill, and the establishment, the Tory party, in the 70s, Mr Heath, and in the magnificent 80s, the magnificent Mrs Thatcher. I'll tell you all about the miners' victory in the 70s, Mrs Thatcher winning the election in the 79 election, the chairman of the National Coal Board being appointed in 1983, that magnificent Mr McGregor. Good name, that is. Fantastic, in fact. The strike starting in 1984, the progression through the strike, the battles, and the turning points in it. And then at the end of the strike and what happened afterwards. The winners, and of course, we all know who the losers were. This, of course, has been the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This presentation was brought to you by the elite establishment. And you know what that is? That's genius. Morning everyone, it's that Monday morning feel again with Mr McGregor's Monday Morning Mining Memoirs. And today I'm talking about a character who's Marmite. Mr Arthur Scargill. You either love him or you hate him. Or can I say, you used to love him, but now you hate him. And that's important. Now, Arthur was always a bit of a high flyer. He was always on committees, elected here, there and everywhere. He became the Yorkshire NUM president. And then he finally became NUM president in 1981. And that's just before the 1984 strike, which he led his union into a battle against the government, the police, and most importantly, the media. He was never going to win, but he didn't tell everyone that, and they did. But, you know, in 2012, he stepped down as president of the NUM to be replaced, and afterwards, after the strike, there was lots of accusations of money going awry, some money from Libya to the Nottinghamshire miners, some money for the Welsh miners from the Soviet Union. Didn't get to the right place in the right time, and there were suggestions there was a little shenanigans, but we shall go no further. But, you know, at the end of the day, accounting records need to be kept. You know, it gets worse. In 1993, Mrs Thatcher had a right to buy policy where you could buy your own house and stuff like that. Now, Mr Scargill was currently living in a flat in London, owned by the NUM, paid £34,000 annual rent from the NUM, and he applied for a right to buy it. You know, most of the NUM members and senior people didn't know about this, and that's absolutely, the application was thrown out, but it wasn't his main residence as he lives up in Yorkshire and stuff like that. David Cameron, ex-Prime Minister in 2014, said, if anyone needs to make an apology for the miners' strike, it's Arthur Scargill. It's the appalling way he led the union. And he did. Chris Kitchen is now the NUM General Secretary, and he just left me this. I'm going to read this out verbatim. So he had 30 years of decent living out the unions, and he got a pension second to none. Had he done the humble thing and walked away with what he was entitled to, his reputation would still be intact. I've always said that if Arthur can no longer control the NUM, he'll try and destroy it. That's what I believe. Those are very strong words, and since then, Arthur in 2014 has become a recluse. He's 82 now, and as far as I'm concerned, the buck stops for you, Arthur. You know, even at the Durham Miners Gala, they don't mention his name. You know, and that's shocking. You know, this has been one big ego trip for him. He enjoyed the luxurious lifestyle, and in doing so, he's ended up burning bridges with the Labour Party and the NUM. You don't fall out with your friends. In essence, Arthur, you're a disgrace. Hang your head in shame. You call yourself a socialist? All for one, one for all? I think not. You've let the miners down, you've let the NUM down, and you've let your principles down. Give yourself a shake. But to finish with, just to remind you, the Daily Mail has put it so precisely. Old King Cole is a bitter old soul, and a bitter old soul is he. We all have an opinion. If you didn't like the opinion, well, make a comment and stuff like that. You know, that's my opinion. I'm happy to listen to yours, but as far as I'm concerned, this has been the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And this presentation was brought to you by the elite establishment. And do you know what that is? That's genius. Morning, everyone. I hope you're all nice and smiles this morning. It's that Monday morning feeling. It's Mr McGregor's Monday morning mining memoirs. And it's just a lovely morning this morning. And this morning I'm going to talk to you in episode 3 about the 1972 miners' strike. Now, the miners' strike was all about this person, the leader of the Conservative Party at the time, Mr Ted Heath. He wasn't that bright. And it was a dispute, of course, with the National Union of Mineworkers. And as usual, it was over pay and conditions. On the 9th of January 1972, the NUM started the strike. They closed every coal mine in the country down. They froze supplies to all the power stations, businesses and heavy industries. And of course, by the time of February 1972, at the start of it, the Central Electricity Generating Board, the CEPG, warned that there were going to be power outages and the lights might go out. And of course, simple economics tells you demand and supply. In winter, there's a high demand for power, and you also need a high supply to deal with the demand. But the miners had restricted the supply, so this, of course, the government were having kittens at this point. So, the last accessible stockpile of coal was from a place in Birmingham. It was Saltley Coke Works, where 700 vehicles were going in and out every day to take fuel to the businesses and power stations. But on the 10th of February, 15,000 protesters turned up, and the Chief Constable of Birmingham, I can imagine his eyes were shocked to see how many people was there, and he decided to close down the depot in the interest of public safety, which had been the right decision. The miners had crippled the supply now. They'd crippled the country's energy supply. One of the organisers of this little escapade of the pickets was, as I quote, an obscure regional union official. And we all knew this gentleman is, Mr Scargill from last week. This was his crowning glory. Well done, Arthur. The strike ended at the end of February. The miners accepted an improved pay offer after a ballot. You may have won the battle, but the war was just beginning. Some people don't forget. The Conservative Party doesn't forget. I didn't forget. And she didn't forget. But that's another story for another week. This, of course, has been the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I think we can improve on that. That's better. Conservative Championship Wrestling. And of course, this has been brought to you by the elite establishment. Right, I'm off for my breakfast and possibly a glass or two of port. Enjoy your Mondays. See you soon. Bye bye. Morning everyone, it's that time of the morning again. It's Mr McGregor's Monday morning mining memoirs. Today, episode 4 is talking about the elections between 74 and 83. And Ted Heath, our good friend from last week, the buffoon, decided to go for a February election. Guess what? Everyone thought he'd win. He didn't. What happened? It was a hung parliament. Labour got the most seats with 301. So what happens here? They cobbled together a minority government. This is Mr Wilson, Harold Wilson, you will know him. And what happened is they lasted till about October 1974 and they had another general election. And they all sat around thinking who was going to win the first time on ITV. And Labour won 319 seats, but that was only a majority of 3. And that's a wafer-thin majority as it goes. The Conservative Party were gutted with Heath. So what happened in February 1975, they had a Conservative election. And Mrs Thatcher got in, and Ted Heath was no more. Then on the 16th of March 1976, the Labour Prime Minister Harold Wilson resigned 5 days after his 60th birthday, which was unheard of, so he was replaced by James Callaghan. In July 76, Jeremy Thorpe, the Liberal leader, was then replaced by David Steele after some allegations made against Mr Thorpe. So, the next election was February. It was May the 3rd, 1979. Labour focused on NHS and full employment. The Conservatives focused on curbing inflation, which was in double figures at this time, and also curbing trade union laws and powers. So there you go, that's the scenario. What happened was, Mrs Thatcher, she won with 339 seats and a majority of 43. She was our first female Prime Minister. Anyway, by 1979, the SNP had decided William Woolf was going to step down and he was replaced by Gordon Wilson. In 1980, James Callaghan stepped down and was replaced by someone more right and more left-wing, than Jeremy Corbyn, and stopped singing it, by this guy, Michael Foot. Anyway, a lot of people weren't happy in the Labour Party about him, and they set off with this quartet, the Gang of Four, and they started the Social Democratic Party. 2 of them were Labour MPs, and the other 2, I can tell you they are Bill Rogers, David Owen, Roy Jenkins and Shirley Williams. And this was an absolute sea change for politics. Anyway, at the next election, David Steele and Roy Jenkins decided to run together as a Liberal SDP pack. Anyway, as you can see with Mr Jenkins, he didn't look too happy. Anyway, by 1982, unemployment was high due to the recession and Thatcher's popularity was decreasing. Then something happened. It was the Falklands War from April to June in 1982, and this saw her popularity soar. After the war, the Conservatives swept to victory on the 9th of June 1983, and she had a landslide victory of 144. With that, she could do anything she wanted, and she did. And next week, I'm going to tell you about this gentleman. This is Ian McGregor. Good name, that is. But that's another story for another week. This has been the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And of course, this has been brought to you by the elite establishment. See you soon. Morning, everyone. It's Mr McGregor's Monday morning mining memoirs, episode 5. And today we're going to talk about this fella, Mr Ian McGregor. He was an ex-British Steel chairman, where he'd done very successfully, and on the 1st of September 1983 he was appointed chairman of the National Coal Board. He was charged with finding new markets and how to promote British coal. NCB was to cut output of all the mines by 4 million tonnes and stem the annual losses then of about £340 million a year, which in today's money is about £750,000, which, as you can imagine, is a lot of money. Our friend, Mr Scargill, had said on his appointment, he's a hatchet man. The policies of this government are clear: to destroy the coal mining industry and the NUM. And he may have got that pretty much right. The clandestine purpose was to avenge the miners' victories in the 1970s. Whitehall suggested if there was going to be a strike, It should be in the spring, and it'd be over pit closures, which tend to divide the miners, instead of over pit, which tended to unite them. So from 1979, the government stockpiled coal and increased capacity at all the power stations. They had 23 million tonnes at the collieries and 24 million tonnes at the power stations, roughly a year's supply. So at the start of March 1984, they were ready to take on the NUM, and all they had to do was set the ball rolling. Well, that's a story for next week, and it certainly will be. This, of course, is CCW, and this presentation has been brought to you by the elite establishment. And you know what that is? That's genius. I'll be quiet this morning. Morning, everyone. It's that Monday morning feeling again. It's Mr McGregor's Monday morning mining memoirs. And now we go to the start of March 1984. And you've got to remember that Mrs Thatcher had put Ian McGregor in charge of the coal board in September 1983. We're now at March 84. The South Yorkshire Coal Board had announced plans to shut Cottonwood Colliery, and this was the evidence outside after they announced the plan. So the NCB and the NUM always had a hate relationship, to be honest. It was always about, was it on geological grounds or was it on economic grounds? McGregor had initially said it was on geological grounds, but then later on he admitted it was on economic grounds. He suggested soon afterwards that he wanted to shut 20 pits over the next year, with around 20,000 jobs going to be lost in the coal mining industry. Well, of course, this set the NUM off, as you can imagine. You know, coal not dough. It's Monday the 12th of March now, 1984. The strikes have taken hold in Yorkshire and Scotland. 81 of the 163 pits in the country are now shut. That's over half of them. And 2 days later, by the 14th of March, it was over 75% of all the collieries shut. And that equates to about 135,000 out of 175,000 miners were out on strike. The battle lines are drawn. But that's another story for next week. This has been the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And this, of course, has been brought to you by the elite establishment. Have a good week. See you next week. And that's genius. Morning, everyone. It's Monday morning again. It's Mr McGregor's Monday Morning Mining Memoirs, episode 7. We're going into April and May of 1984. Remember, there was never a national ballot of all the members held, and the delegates decided that Arthur's decision to come out on strike was valid. Flying pickets were everywhere. All over the country, miners bussed around the country to picket and blockade sites. By the start of May 1984, the talks between the NCB and the NUM had broken down, and Arthur had walked out, refusing to talk about pit closures. Fortunately for the government, they'd reached agreement with ASLEF, the Train Drivers Union, and the National Union of Railwaymen, which meant they couldn't support the strike or assist and support the NUM, which was a great move. This is Orgreave Colliery, and by the end of May 1984, things were getting a little bit heated. One day there were 7,000 picketers there, and on the worst violence on one day, there was 82 arrested and 62 arrested on one day. The police cost was astronomical. It was 65 million in terms of, which is about 175 million now. And this is just for the first 3 months of the strike. And on the 30th of May, Arthur gets arrested. And that's where I'll finish today, because next week we'll talk about Orgreave Colliery and the battles there. This is CCW, and this presentation has been brought to you by the elite establishment. And you know what that is. That's genius. Have a good Monday. Morning, everyone. It's Mr McGregor's Monday morning mining memoirs. We're now at episode 8. Blimey heck, where's the time gone? The date is Monday, the 18th of June, 1984, and the place is Orgreave Coke Plant. Now, what happens is the blast furnaces need coal supplies to turn into coke. Now, there were permitted deliveries of about 16,000 tonnes per week to keep it going, but there was an explosion at one of the blast furnaces on May the 21st. This was mainly due to the poor quality of coal. So British Steel requested a large container of coal from Poland, which of course would have gone down like an acid lift. On the 22nd of May, the day after, a sympathetic steelworker told someone from the Barnsley NUM what was going on, and on the 23rd, there were pickets all outside Orgreave. There was about 5,000 of them. This is Orgreave Coke Plant here, and they started busting in the pickets. You know, this is going to cause great trouble. What was happening was that the police now were trying to stop anything similar to Saltley Coke Works in the 1970s, which I talked about a few weeks ago. Here's Michael Mansfield. He's a legal guy. They wanted to teach the miners a lesson, a big lesson, such that they wouldn't come out in force again. And that was the government's idea. So there was a standoff with the miners and the police. But then, when the wagons started loading, there was a confrontation, as you can see. And the police and the protesters were pushing each other. And what happened is, they had riot shields. And they had snatch squads to go in and pull out all the bad lads. Now, as you can imagine, this wouldn't go down well. And we get to the next picture. Whoops, there's it. This is the next picture, and this was all about the horseback. Now, South Yorkshire Police's Assistant Chief Constable Anthony Clement ordered a mounted charge against the miners. Now, this was, the police started it, and he ordered another 2 mounted charges to split up the miners. They were sending short shield snatchers in to pick out miners who were deleterious, etc., and they delivered a good beating to some of the miners. There was a lull in the afternoon when most of the protesters went home, but there was still a few left in the late afternoon when they decided to do one more cavalry charge, and there was, you know, they tried to push them all the miners back to Orgreave, and it was, you know, they were massively outnumbered with the miners. On the day, there were 71 pickets arrested with riot, and if you were arrested for riot, you could have a life sentence, and 24 pickets with violent disorder. The trial collapsed. None of them actually went to jail, anything happened, and there was compensation for 39 of them of about 425,000, as the police evidence was unreliable. But this is where the fun starts. It was the police that started it. The BBC on the news that night showed the miners throwing stones at the police and the police coming back with the horse riders. It didn't happen that way. So be very careful who you trust and who you listen to. This is CCW, and this presentation has been brought to you by the Elite Establishment. Have a good Monday. Morning everyone, it's Mr McGregor's Monday morning mining memoirs, and I think we're up to episode 9 now. This is July to October 1984. Now, the police costs at the start of July 1984 were astronomical. There'd been 3,900 arrested, 640 injured, and sadly 2 people had died. In July, on the 9th of July, there was a dock strike against the movement of coal across the country. This only lasted for 10 days, but put a spoke in everything. 14th of July was a Durham Miners Gala. Massively attended, 25,000 folk appeared. Now, you've got to remember about the National Union of Mineworkers. It's a federation composed of a number of separate district unions, each based on a regional coal field. In order to declare a national strike, Rule 43 of the Constitution of the Union requires about 55% majority of a strike. Now, Arthur didn't think he could get this all over the country, so what he went on was Rule 41. NUM national executives to declare official any strike called in one of the constituent areas. His plan was to allow the more militant constituents, unions, to go on strike, declare the national strike, which he did, and then endeavour to spread to the the other locals. But that was his plan. What happened was South Wales NUM were taken to the High Court and something called sequestration. In law, sequestration is the act of removing, separating or seizing anything from the possession of its owner under process of law for the benefit of the creditors of the state. So on the 31st July, the High Court fined the South Wales NUM £50,000 under the new anti-union laws. This is the first time it's actually been used. This is Neil Kinnock, who was leader of the Labour Party, and our friend Mr Scargill. These two did not see eye to eye, and Kinnock said on this day, the courts will have their way, which was a bit of a kick in the jewels for the miners. On the 23rd of August, there was a second national dock strike, but this lasted for 3 weeks. TUC, on the 3rd of September, decided they were going to support the miners. They said it, they talked it, but it never materialised. NACODS, on the 28th of September 1984, the Pick Deputies Union voted by over 82.5% to strike. Then 4 weeks later, they call off the strike, because I think they could see the writing on the wall. Then on the 26th of October 1984, a High Court orders sequestration of NUM funds. And at this point, I can imagine Arthur's having kittens. This is CCW, and this has been brought to you by the Elite Establishment. Have a great Monday. See you soon. Morning everyone, it's Mr McGregor's Monday Morning Mining Memoirs. And we're up to episode 10, The Offer and the Other Union. This is Ian McGregor. The offer was, at the start of November 1984, NCB offers miners a back-to-work cash bonus. This helps miners with families, mortgages, mounting bills, and of course Christmas round the corner. Labour leader Neil Kinnock makes a stand and says he's not going to appear on any platform with Arthur Scargill. The offer take-up. On the 12th of November, 1,200 miners go back. A week later, 2,300 miners go back. The tide is definitely turning. The Trade Union Congress say they will not take any action in support of the NUM. This is the other union, the Union of Democratic Mineworkers, based in Nottinghamshire. Nottinghamshire were expelled from the NUM at the beginning of December 84, so they founded the Union of Democratic Mineworkers. In this area, they didn't really want to strike, but they were mercilessly picketed for 12 months with violence and intimidation. The NUM regards this union as the Scab Union. Arthur's House of Cards is just about to fall. Gets to the end of February 1985 and 3,800 miners return to work that day. So it's hi-ho, it's off to work we go. And next week it's the final episode. I know you'll be all sorry. Episode 11, the end of the strike. This is CCW, and this presentation has been brought to you by the Elite Establishment. And you know what that is? That's genius. Morning everyone, it's Mr McGregor's final Monday morning mining memoirs. It's episode 11, the end of the strike. Ian McGregor, the end is nigh. He pledges that sacked miners will not be re-employed. The NUM, by the end of February 85, pressure is building on the NUM as one by one the regional coalfields abandon the strike. On the 3rd of March 85, an NUM Special Delegate Conference is convened and votes to end the strike by a majority of only 7, 98 to 91. During the strike, there are 11,291 people arrested and 8,392 people are charged. On the 5th of March 1985, all the miners go back to work. The strike is over. The winners, Ian McGregor of the National Coal Board and Margaret Thatcher of the Conservative Party. The losers, Arthur Scargill and the NUM. This is CCW, and this presentation has been brought to you by the Elite Establishment. And you know what that is? That's genius.